What do you see as the biggest concern for central banks right now? Is inflation really transitory, or is there a risk that because we believe it's not transitory, it actually becomes sticky?
I think central banks are really worried about inflation now. Much of what we see probably is transitory, but nevertheless, it's a lot easier to see upside risks to inflation than downside risks. None of us know where inflation will go over the next year or so, but upside risks are coming, I think, from three sources. One, as we gradually learn to live with COVID-19, the bottleneck effects are pushing up some prices. Secondly, energy prices, we've seen, even yesterday, they moved all over the place for gas prices. We don't know where they'll go, but it's much easier to see upside risks than downside risks. And third, and I think one which is very different from the past 20, 30 years, is that the political risks are also much stronger. There's real pressure now to boost public spending, but not to raise taxes to finance it. And as interest rates start to rise, market rates are going up, policy rates will follow. Politicians will be nervous about the impact of that on their financing costs. All of that will make it much more difficult for central banks not to fall behind the curve.
So what should they do, Lord Kent? I mean, it's great to speak to you also with the history that you've had at the Bank of England. In 2011, inflation was at 5%. You left interest rates at 0.5%. I mean, how do you view, if you were in charge now, what would you do?
I think the most important thing is to keep options open. I think they should abandon forward guidance. I think that's been a big mistake in the last few years. The Federal Reserve has been saying for some while that it will keep rates low for a long while. Perhaps not even raise rates until 2023, 24. All central banks have suddenly changed their language, and that's to be welcomed. But you can see why they're reluctant to do it, because it means abandoning what they were saying before. And the important thing now is not to pretend that we know what will happen in the future, but to demonstrate that central banks are willing to respond very quickly if those upside risks materialize.